Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're just going to wait a few minutes just to let other people get into the room this morning, and then we will go ahead and get started. But while we are waiting on others to enter the room, for everyone that's already in the room, if you don't mind, put your name and put where you're from in the chat. And I hope everyone is having a wonderful morning. The sun is shining where we are here in Northwest Louisiana. So I hope that you guys are getting a chance to experience some of this sunshine too before fall actually kicks in.
It did cool off finally, though, up
It
here in Northwest.
did.
Thank the Lord.
I
Thank the Lord.
know. Because we had some hot days over the summer. Okay,
Oh,
so we have a couple of people that
yes.
are chiming in there from Shreveport. So hello, everyone in Shreveport. All right, Scott. So our numbers are starting to calm down. So I think, well, we have a very good topic to dive into today. So I know we're going to have a lot of questions. I know you have a lot of good information to give to our families as well as our community partners that are joining us. So we're going to just go ahead and get started this morning. So good morning, everyone. My name is Chanel Jackson, and I am the Executive Director here of Family 7 Families Region 7. And we are located in Northwest Louisiana. Our office is located in Bossier, but we do cover the 9 parishes that make up Northwest Louisiana. And so for those of you who may not know, Family 7 Families is a information and resource center for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. And we like to say that we serve as a one-stop shop. You know, we've been there, we've done that. We definitely make it easier for our families to navigate this maze of disability services. So if you have not gotten a chance to contact our office for help or attend one of our events or do anything, then definitely go to our email, I mean, not email, but go to our website at www.fhfregion7.com and sign up with our email list, and you will get blast of everything that we do here in Northwest Louisiana. I also want to say, because I know that we have people from all over the state, that there is a Family 7 Families in every region of the state. So if you would like to know what Family 7 Families is in your region, you can always go to our website again at www.fhfregion7.com and click on FHF centers, and it will pull up a list of all the centers around the state. So with that being said, we're going to dive into today's topic, and that is getting the most out of ABA. So today we have our presenter Scott Lepley, who is with Family Solutions, and he's going to tell us everything that we need to know about ABA and more. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So please put all of your questions in the chat box, and we will go through and answer those questions at the end of the webinar. And also, this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording later on today. So, Scott, I am going to turn it over to you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Chanel. And just to start it off, I just kind of wanted to take a second to thank Families Helping Families for having me, just to kind of echo what she was saying. They are a one-stop shop, guys. Before we went live, I was talking to her about just how many people I send Families Helping Families way. So many questions, whether it comes to how to navigate school or accommodations. I've never met someone from Families Helping Families who didn't either know the answer or know how to get to the answer. So please, please, please look them up. They're an incredible resource. And I'm so grateful that they've decided to have me on to share my information with you. So with that, I will get into it. Just to introduce myself a bit, my name is Scott Lepley. I'm a BCBA, have been for several years. I have been working in the field of ABA in some capacity for almost 15 years now. And I have worked predominantly in clinics. I've worked in schools, in homes, in a residential facility. I've worked with 2-year-olds. I have worked with 32-year-olds. I have seen a lot of ABA over the years that is kind of informing this presentation and informing my reason for doing this presentation. Currently, I am serving as the Director of ABA Services for Family Solutions. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Family Solutions, we are an ABA company with clinics all over the state. I'm coming to you from my home clinic here in Shreveport, Louisiana, right next to where Chanel was coming from in Bossier. We also have clinics in West Monroe, Ruston, Lafayette, and opening in November will be our newest clinic in Hammond. So we are very excited to be serving a previously very underserved area in Tangipahoa Parish and the surrounding areas, and very thrilled about that. Um, to get into this talk, getting the most out of ABA, and a little bit deeper into what we'll be talking about. What is ABA, right? The reason I wanted to do this talk, and this is actually my second time doing it with Families Helping Families, and thankfully they've asked me back to do it again. But the biggest reason I wanted to do it is because, again, over my years in this field, I've had countless intake evaluations, that kind of first appointment, right, where parents coming in, I'm meeting the child for the first time, we're getting together a game plan, a behavior plan, and one of the first questions I like to ask is, well, how familiar are you with ABA? You know, how much do you know about what we're going to do today and going forward? And the general answer is, Scott, nothing. I don't know. AB what? I don't know what this is. And it didn't take me long to figure out it's not because these parents weren't doing their research or weren't involved in the process, this, that, or the other. It's because these parents have been in an absolute spin cycle. You, the parent of an individual on the autism spectrum, goes through a spin cycle after receiving that diagnosis from the day that the pediatrician starts saying, I believe there's maybe a few developmental concerns here that we need to look out for, to the day that, you know, you get told, hey, we need to schedule an evaluation, to getting that. And I know they've talked to me. They get that diagnosis and the doctor will say, well, you need this, you need ABA, OT, PT, speech, and you need it right now. You need to go here. You need to talk to this person. I recommend talking to this neurologist and this pediatric psychologist and this, that, and the other. And by the time they get to my office, they've been through it. They've been sent here, there, and everywhere, and they don't know what's what. And so I wanted to take today and the hour that we have and break down and unpack what ABA is, explain the parts and pieces of it, what makes good ABA, maybe some things to look out for in an ideal ABA, and how you as a parent and you as and your child as a client can get the absolute most out of it when you're able to access these services. And so with that, we'll dive in. And like Chanel said, I will be kind of trying to get through. It's a shorter presentation. We'll get through that and have a good Q&A session at the end. So the first thing I kind of wanted to touch on before talking about what ABA is what ABA is not, right? There's a lot of myths and kind of misinformation out there about what ABA is. And first and foremost, this is not an attempt to make your child unautistic. We are not here to cure autism. We have no desire to cure autism. Being on the autism spectrum is part of your child's unique makeup. It's part of who makes them who they are. We are not here to change the autism. We're not here to cover it up, make it go away, anything like that. We are here to teach your child the most functional way to access the things that they want out of life, to build those friendships, to get their basic needs met, to get their emotional needs met, and to get them to do that in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that's going to make sense to the world around them. So we are looking to just support the individual. We're looking to equip them with as many tools as possible. And obviously, we'll talk about how specifically in later slides. Another thing ABA is not and should never be is restraints and punishment. And I'll go deeper into the idea of trauma-informed care later in this presentation. And if one were to do research on ABA and come across certain articles, they would contradict what I'm saying right now. But one of the big things that I do want to kind of plant a flag on is that we as a field have come a long way, especially in the past decade. And I've been very fortunate to be able to see it firsthand and to be able to be a part of that new wave of ABA that's coming out, and these practitioners that are making a commitment to trauma-informed care. In today's current ABA, and what is supported by our science, what is supported by our current research, And most importantly, what is mandated by our current ethics boards, it is not restraint. Okay. We do not seek to restrain a child that's having a tantrum because they're having a tantrum. We do not, you use restraint chairs or anything like that to the point where, you know, I've been working with other professionals and they said, hey, this would go better if we put them in a high chair. And I've even kind of said and kind of backed off and said that's he needs to have autonomy, right? And we push for that. It is not necessarily punishment, right? We again as a science, and I'll get more into this as we go throughout the presentation, but we as a science look to reinforce. And what that means is punishment is going to be used last. So even things like timeouts, like what we call response costs, that's going to be the last case scenario. And also any kind of, and I do want to make clear, obviously, if the child is a danger to themselves or others in the environment, obviously we would look to block that. None of that gets done without the parent knowing, being involved, signing off on any procedures, things like that. But our first instinct, our first go-to is never going to be to restrain or punish. The last thing I want to get into as to what ABA is not, we are not an academic program. We are not school. We are not a substitute for school. As a matter of fact, we are, as at least in all of my sites here in Louisiana, we are 100% payer funded, generally by Medicaid or private insurance, and they mandate that we do not work on academic skills. So while we can work with a child on the prerequisite skills, those kind of pre-skills that they need to be successful in a school setting, things like attending to a task, wanting to sit at a table, focus, things like that. While we can work on those things, we're not going to work on necessarily teaching them their alphabet or things like that. We do work on tolerating group instruction, stuff like that. So we get them ready for school and we support the academic environment. We ourselves are not an academic program. So after talking about what ABA absolutely is not, obviously we need to talk about, well, then what on earth is ABA? What are we doing here, right? So what ABA is, it first off stands for Applied Behavior Analysis, and it is a form of behavioral therapy that seeks to do the following things. We're going to increase functional communication, we're going to decrease problem behavior, and we're going to teach and reinforce pro-social behaviors. And I'll unpack that specifically here in these kind of coming slides. So how do we accomplish those things, right? We're reducing behavior, we're increasing communication, we're increasing pro-social behavior, things like that. How are we doing these things? We have a three-step model that we approach any case, any behavioral treatment with, and that's these right here. And again, I'll do this with a lot of slides. I'll kind of go over it and then I'll unpack it little by little. So we're going to find the function of the behavior. We're going to place that behavior on extinction, and then we're going to reinforce the behavior we want to see. So let's first start off with that finding the function of the behavior. And you can see in parentheses, I have why. What is the why? Right. So let me take it to, again, just about every intake evaluation that I've done just about. There comes a point in that intake evaluation where we've gotten through the intros and I say, okay, what are you concerned about? What are you seeing from your child that you feel we need to target with this ABA? What are you feeling you want to work on? And so they'll hand me a list or give me a list of problem behaviors, whether it be tantrum, destroying things in the house, aggressing towards siblings or pets, hurting themselves even. And then I'll ask the question, okay, so they're engaging in these really big tantrum behaviors that are lasting a while. Why are they doing that? And a parent will look at me and say, Scott, I don't know. It happens out of the clear blue sky. We'll be fine. And then boom, World War III breaks out. And that can be absolutely how it looks. We as ABA practitioners use our science to figure out the why, though. We operate under the assumption that every behavior, Every single behavior that a human being exhibits, whether we be neurotypical or on the autism spectrum, every single behavior has a function. There has to be a why, right? And we boil it down in the field of ABA, and there's some more complex functions, but we try to boil it down to one of four functions so we can teach the parents these. Does the child want attention? Do they want a thing, a tangible? Do they want to escape something? Does it just feel good? Is it automatically reinforcing? Any parents out there or any practitioners who work heavily with the population that's on the spectrum will know there's a lot of what we call stimming behavior, whether that's arm flapping, jumping, humming, things like that nature. That's what we call automatically reinforcing. It just feels good to them. It regulates their system, right? But those other functions are going to be the ones we look to hone in on. The attention. Do they need something or do they want to get away from something? And I can almost with 100% certainty guarantee that when those parents are seeing those behaviors, that in their mind is coming out of the clear blue sky, it's tied to one of those functions. And so it is us on, and that's why it's called behavior analysis. It is on us to analyze that behavior the way that we see it and come up with that function. So once we have that function, we kind of go to the next step and we put that behavior on extinction. Right. And that's kind of an odd term. That's kind of a big term. It makes you maybe think of the dinosaurs and stuff like that. So let me explain what extinction actually is. Extinction is making sure that a behavior does not gain access to a desired item, to escape, or to attention. And my best analogy that I like to use for this to kind of illustrate it is the idea of a door, right? Essentially, what we're doing with extinction is we are locking the door. We are not allowing that behavior to access what that child wants that behavior to access. So say, for example, we have a child who, excuse me, is very into certain YouTube videos, right? Maybe they're a big Bluey fan, I don't know. And they are engaging in a tantrum because they've learned over time that if they engage in a tantrum, or maybe if they hit their brother or sister, or maybe if they throw something across the room, mom is going to get really frazzled and she's going to pull that iPad out and she's going to give him that iPad. So what that then teaches that child is, okay, if I want to watch Bluey, I got to throw a tantrum. I got to throw something across the room. I got to whop little sister in the face and I'm going to get that tablet. What we are doing with Extinction again is we are locking the door. We are clinically trained professionals. We have a staff of people who have seen it all, done it all, who are not worried about behavior. They can engage in these tantrum behaviors for an extended period of time, and it's just not going to rattle them. So we keep that door locked. You can tantrum all you want. You're not going to get the iPad that way. Not in our clinical setting. You can throw chairs at us. You can throw your food at us, bite us, kick us. It's not going to make a lick of difference as long as you're safe and not a danger to yourself. We're going to let you engage in it. We're going to let you have the moment, but we're not going to give you that item for engaging in that tantrum. And inevitably, there's someone out there who is going, well, Scott, you told me from the get-go, this is not a negative environment. This is not punishing. That sounds pretty punishing, right? This kid is asking for something the best way that they know how. And you're not giving it to them. What if what they want is food? What if they're thirsty? And you're not going to give it to them because they're upset and tantruming. And to that I say, yes, that looks really punishing. That looks terrible. That sounds terrible. That doesn't sound like something I want to engage in. However, it only looks like punishment unless we don't hand them the key. And that's the second part of the equation, right? We are going to use what we call differential reinforcement to hand them a key to unlocking that door the correct way. So what differential reinforcement is allowing more functional behaviors to access the reinforcement. So we've done step one. Well, really step one would be finding the function of the behavior. So we found out the function, and again, I'm just kind of using a hypothetical child, right? The function of that behavior was he wants to watch YouTube on his tablet. So he's going to tantrum. We figured that out. We've gone to step two. You can tantrum all you want, bud. That's not going to get the tablet. I'm sorry. It's just not going to do it. We're going to keep our poker face on and we're not going to give in to that. Now, step three would be we need to give that child a way to access that need, to access that want. And so that's the other part of our analysis. We're going to analyze, what is this child's skill set? What can they do? What can they exert for us that's going to get us that? Now, some of these children are able to exhibit verbal communication. And for those children, we're going to ask them to say I or iPad. If they have more complex speech, I want iPad. Some of them are not capable of verbal communication. We're going to use things like a PEX system, which is, to go into that very briefly, picture exchange communication system. So it looks like a big Velcro binder with pictures of all the things they might want during the day. And in this scenario, they would rip off a picture of an iPad and hand it to a therapist. And at that point, they would get it. So why are we doing this, right? Why are we changing this to that? Because we, again, going back to the original topic of what ABA is, and that is teaching these individuals a more functional way to get their needs met, to interact with their environment. We need to teach them these unfunctional patterns of behavior are not going to work. They're going to fall on deaf ears, because when you go into the school environment, when you go into the social setting, when you go to playgrounds, things like that, and you're with your peers, a tantrum is not going to be the most ideal way to get that need met. Functional communication is. But again, that's what they're capable of at the moment. That's what they're going to be capable of after ABA. And so what it looks like practically is, the first time they rip that card off and hand it to it, they're getting that iPad right away. They're getting a parade thrown for them. The tech's going to go nuts, unless it's a kid that's kind of sensitive to noise. We've had to learn to, not every kid wants excitement in the session. That's particularly hard for me, if you can't tell, I'm a little bit animated. But we are going to reinforce. We are going to differentially reinforce. We didn't reinforce the tantrum. We are reinforcing the communication. And little by little, these children are wildly intelligent. Just because they have a developmental disability does not mean they have an intellectual one necessarily. They're very intelligent. And so they're going to learn that pattern. They're going to learn, okay, I know where I am. I know what Mr. Scott is like. Okay. I can tantrum and scream all day long and exhaust myself, and that's not going to get me a darn thing. But if I get my binder out, he's going to get me what I need. And they're going to learn that, and they're going to learn more of a repertoire. And little by little, again, the behavior reduces, the communication increases, and we have a much more functional way of interacting with our environment. Real quick, who does ABA benefit? And again, I'll just kind of go through this and then unpack it a little bit. All age ranges 2 and beyond. Again, I truly mean it. I've worked with 2-year-olds. I've worked with 32-year-olds. I've worked with everybody in between. Diagnostic levels 1 through 3. Those of you who, again, have a child on the autism spectrum will know that it is broken down by levels. Level 1 being a low need for support. That is somebody that we would think of formerly being classified as Asperger's, for example. All the way to level 3, which we refer to as a high need for support. Somebody who has very extreme behaviors, very, very large deficits in communication, and we can benefit all that. Essentially, this benefits anybody who is looking to reduce problem behavior, increase their communication, improve executive function, improve social skills, find more functional ways to get their needs met. And the reason I put this slide in here is I meet so many people who inevitably, just in that flow of conversation, say, hey, what do you do? And then there's a 20-minute explanation of what on earth is a BCBA and all that. But when they figure out what it is I do, they go, oh, that's kind of cool. You know, I have a niece who's on the spectrum, but I don't really think, they need therapy necessarily. They just really struggle to make friends. And I go, no, they absolutely could use therapy. We work on social skills. Again, that is a need. Socialization is a need. And oftentimes these individuals, even if they're level 1, have really unfunctional patterns of getting that social need met. And we can teach more functional patterns so they can access that. So what to expect from an ABA session, right? So we've gone into the science of it, what ABA seeks to do. What is it going to look like for your child once you drop them off at that ABA center? They're typically 3 to 5 hours long. And an important thing to remember, and this kind of goes into that, it encompasses everything. right? We're working on behavior, we're working on communication, we're working on social skills. We may be working on toileting and adaptive skills and stuff like that. We're working on a wide array of everything. What it is not, though, and I like to make this clear to parents who see a 3 hour session, a 5 hour session, and my child is 3 years old. Oh my God, can they handle that? Yes, because it is not 5 hours of sitting at a table and drilling skills down. We're playing, we're getting out, we're going to the sensory gym, we're doing circle time with our peers. We are getting outside and playing if that's a part of our program. We're taking breaks, we're earning that reinforcement, we're getting time on our tablet, we're earning snacks, we're doing all the things, and we're working on things within that. It is not 3 to 5 hours of sitting at a table and I couldn't handle it. I don't think anyone really could, right? So, like I said, the session is going to flow or play kind of like a school day almost, but the therapist is always there. And here's the at the bottom line, if you hone in on anything on this slide, one on one. ABA should be one on one, right? That's one of the things that's going to differentiate us from the academic environment, from a daycare, from anything else. You will have a therapist one on one with your child at all times. That's what allows us to individualize. That's what allows us to hone in on their specific behavior patterns. That's what allows us to reinforce the second they give us that communication we want, because it is all hands on deck to them. And so, key components of it. Quality ABA should include the following components: active supervision by a qualified BCBA, and I'll get into that in a second, parent engagement, transparency and involvement in planning, trauma-informed care, excuse me. As I said on the onset, I'm a BCBA. For those of y'all unfamiliar with what on earth that is, it stands for a board certified behavior analyst. And essentially, what I am and what my colleagues in the field are, it is a master's level credential. And we have taken courses specific to behavior analysis and the treatment of autism spectrum disorder, specific to behavioral therapy, and we have passed a board exam on all these things. And now, guys, I'm happy to say there's not a lot of people out there in the field that are trying to pass themselves off as doing ABA and they're not BCBAs. It's very easy to verify. You can go on board websites, the BACB website, stuff like that. So that's not going on too terribly much. Parent engagement we'll get into, and transparency and involvement we'll get into. Again, going back to trauma-informed care, that is something that thankfully has been such a big push in the last decade in our field. The idea that we are going to acknowledge the client's perspective. We're not going to physically prompt them throughout a day. We're not going to, I briefly touched on, we might be teaching a child to sit at a table, right? When they're all over the place, they have no interest in sitting at a table, and that's not going to play too well in kindergarten. We're not ever, especially not in any of my clinics, we are not ever going to pick a child up and sit them in a chair and say, "Hey, great job sitting in a chair." That's traumatic. That removes all of a child's autonomy. That removes all of a child's ability to make their own decision. And quite frankly, it takes away their ability to learn in that situation. We've just made the decision for them. They didn't learn a thing. We just put them there. What we are going to do, if a child is very averse to a chair, maybe they've gone through something like this and it's traumatized them a little bit, we're just going to get close to it and say, "Hey, let's just touch the chair real quick." We touch the chair, we're going to reinforce. We're going to do that for a while. Then we might move up to the point where it's like, "Hey, just touch your bottom to the chair. We're going to reinforce." Let's sit in the chair. You choose to sit in the chair for 5 minutes and we're going to reinforce. And we work that all the way up. And then we start bringing toys to the table and they can access it at the table. We're going to work our way up to the point where they're sitting at that table because they've learned there's nothing bad about it. There's nothing aversive. There's things I like there, and they're making the choice to sit at that table. So what is supervision specifically? I've gone over what is a BCBA, and BCABAs are simply assistant BCBAs. It is a bachelor's level credential. They still have to pass a board exam. They still have to go through field work supervision. They just have to practice under one of us. But basically, this is the process where we oversee and make decisions about the client's therapy, essentially. This is best done in person at least once a week. And so these are questions that you can ask to kind of gauge the quality of that center. How many behavior analysts do you have on site? Ideally, you should have at least one on site that is dedicated to that site. There are a lot of clinics out there who you know, cutting corners is a bad way to put it. Um, but we'll zoom in a BCBA. That's not ideal because they're not there with the behavior techs. They're not there daily, or you know, they're spread between a few centers. Really, you like to have a behavior analyst dedicated to your site in person. You can ask questions like, on average, how often is supervision done? How often do you update plans? These are things that a BCBA in the intake evaluation should be able to clearly answer for you. What to expect as a parent? Again, a big component of ABA, as I described it previously, is parent engagement. And so we can expect kind of a few things here. The initial evaluation, and I'll go into that in depth in another slide, and you can see kind of what the level of involvement is there, daily progress reports, and periodic parent training. And again, I'll get into that a little bit deeper, but you will be, even though this is a service where you drop your child off and come back and get them, this is a service where you can expect to be very engaged in every step of the way. You certainly should not be dropping a child off and be completely in the dark about what your child is doing 3 to 5 hours a day. Um, you should know at drop off who your child will be seeing, what they'll be doing, what the goals are, and then how the day went. And then again, I'll get into the initial evaluation and parent training here. So the initial evaluation generally happens a week or two before your child starts treatment there. It's about, give or take, an hour, hour and a half long. Generally, our BCBA's budget an hour and a half, 2 hours for it in case we need it. But it kind of has two components, right? We are going to interview you, the parent, to ask some of the questions that I alluded to. What behaviors are you seeing at home? What do you want to target? What do you want to get out of therapy? You know, and we're going to ask about medical history, about sleep patterns, feeding patterns, all the things. We're going to try to get a very full picture of your child. The other part is going to be the child assessment. And at that point, the child is going to be with a BCBA, either with the one who did the parent interview or with another BCBA on staff. Excuse me, and they will be assessing the child to see with one of our more formal tools. And tools like the ABLES, the VB map. What's important to know about that is essentially what we're looking at is, where is this child's verbal ability? Where are their social skills? What are their play skills? How do they interact with us? What do they like? What do they dislike? What are we going to do on that day one, 2 weeks from now, to get this kid to buy in and want to move forward with us? So that's what we're looking at there. And a lot of these assessments look like play. As a matter of fact, I bought a new VB map kit for one of my clinics. I threw it into my trunk. I have a 2-year-old son. He opened my trunk because it's a game he loves to play. He saw it and his eyes got big as saucers because he saw a bucket full of toys, farm animals, puzzles, coloring sheets, bouncy balls, all the things. Because to do these assessments, we need to do a lot of play. And so that's what it looks like, right? What I would encourage anyone to come to the initial evaluation with: any medical treatment records. If your child is in school, bring us the IEP, any of that. Again, we are going to be with the child. There probably at some point we're going to be separating you from the child so we can do the interview, we can do the assessment. So if they have something that makes them transition well, certainly bring that. And of course, any questions or concerns you have about your child's treatment or what their day is going to look like. Parent training. This is a big one. And this is one, and I like to highlight, this is not necessarily like a luxury item. This is not something we do in addition to. This is a part of the treatment. Again, we are payer funded, and insurance companies mandate that if we are providing ABA services, we have to be providing parent training. because what we do in the clinic is not going to change this child's life unless you can do it at home. And how am I going to expect, how am I as a BCBA going to expect you to do it at home if I don't take the time to train you, to bring you in? So what should parent training look like? What can you expect it to look like? Um, Over the years, it's been a 30-minute, 60-minute, whatever works for the parent appointment. And it can be a combination of things. It can be, and most frequently, I find it to be a combination of two things. We'll kind of start off in my office. We'll go over how things have been going in therapy. I'll get, hey, what have things been looking like at home? What have you been seeing? And then we'll go into the session and I'll demonstrate a few things we're working on so the parents can see it live and in action. If they have questions for me as far as, hey, this is what's happening at home, how would you deal with that? I can demonstrate it right there in parent training. I can have their behavior technician demonstrate it right there in parent training. So I described that. Should be on a schedule that works for your family and provides the needed impact. Should at least occur at least a few times for authorization. Generally, an authorization is 6 months. It should be happening at least a couple times within that. And I have parent trainings that run the gambit. I have parents who are able to say, Scott, I would like to see you every week on Wednesday afternoon. That is going to be my time. And I say, great, I'll see you then. I'll put you on the books. I have some parents, some grandparents, guardians, caregivers, whatever the situation is, look at me and say, Scott, I'm a single parent. I do shift work. I have no clue when I'm going to be able to come in and see you. And I say, great, give me a call and we'll make time for it. If you can see me once a month, once every 2 months for half an hour in passing as you're picking your kid up, we'll make time for it, right? Because it is again, it is a required part of the therapy. So things that you could and should advocate for within your child's treatment, the goals you want to see your child achieve. Again, going back to kind of sort of the skeleton of that initial evaluation, that should be a question you're being asked. Now, we are BCBAs, we are the ones that, per the therapy, are being tasked to write the behavior plan. That said, this should be functionally relevant to you. And when I say that, that means it should make an impact on your life, right? These should be skills that change your family's life, that change your child's life as you see it. So a BCBA should not be just working in isolation and working on only things that they see per the VB map or per the ABLES or this or that. We should be looking for your input and what is going to make the most impact to you. I've worked on skills that I would have never thought to work on. Because a parent came up to me and said, Scott, it would be amazing if they could participate in family game night. We do family game night every Friday, and every Friday that client is in a corner on their iPad. My God, their brothers and sisters would love it so much if they could join just a little bit. So we work on that. A big part of our household is church, or maybe it's going to the groceries and helping with that on Sundays after we do that. So you know what? I've worked on carrying groceries with a client. I've worked on unpacking groceries with a client. I've worked on going with a store to the client. Things that you won't find on a VB map, on an ABLES, on a peak assessment, but they're relevant to you as the family of that child. We absolutely can work on those. We absolutely should find a way to work on those. Again, a parent training schedule that works for you. If you're one of those parents, one of those guardians that is heavy on shift work, short on time, say that. Make that clear up front. Say, look, this is when I'm going to be able to do it, and advocate that BCBA work with you on that schedule. And again, trauma-informed care and transparency. This should not be we're forcing a child to comply. This should not be we're restraining a child to comply. This should not be you drop your child off at ABA, you pick them up, and you hope they've worked on the relevant things. Advocate for knowing what's going on in those sessions. And again, this is not necessarily to say that mine is the golden, perfect, shining example. But in my clinics, every parent gets a parent sheet at the end of the day saying, what did we do? What did we work on? What went well? What do we still need work on? What did we eat? How many times did we go to the bathroom? All that stuff. You as a parent should know what your child's day looks like in any of these centers. Um, and that kind of concludes it. Like I said, we still have, I believe, about 20 minutes. And I kind of wanted to allot that time because a lot of times what I find in these webinars is parents that are on a waiting list having trouble accessing a BCBA. And I told this to Chanel before the onset of this, even if there's a parent out there that just wants to go totally off topic of anything I've just talked about, feel free, either here or if we run out of time, this is where I can be contacted, either about the presentation, about literally anything else about the field of ABA, about any of our centers here in Louisiana. Feel free to reach out. And with that point, or at that point, I will turn it, let Chanel come back in. Here she comes, outstanding, and we can get to some questions.
All right, Scott, thank
All
you
right,
for that awesome presentation and the information that you provided. Some of these questions you've already provided the answer in your presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and read the question again just in case you want to elaborate just a little bit more. So
great.
the first question that we have is, how do you distinguish a tantrum versus a sensory need?
Outstanding question. I absolutely love that. So, what we're looking at, and again, that is the analysis part of this. As behavior analysts, we are trained to look at a behavior and see, is there a tangible function? To go into a little bit deeper how we do that, we generally look at what's referred to as the ABC, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So with a behavior, with a B, we should see a clear A, right? We took the tablet away, the tantrum began. The child is nearing their lunchtime. We're starting to tantrum and look for some food. We're in an environment that we don't like. We've been presented with a math worksheet, this, that, or the other, and we want to escape, so we're engaging in a tantrum. Versus we have seen, and again, we're one-on-one, we're monitoring this child at all times. We start to see those prerequisite signs, right? We've talked to the parent, we see that body tightening, we see them, their stimming start to elevate. We see those attempts to self-regulate until we can no longer self-regulate anymore, right? And even within those moments, even within those sensory meltdown moments, there's the ability to prompt functional communication. And sometimes, and I preach this to my techs all the time, look, they're too far gone. They're not going to rip off that textbook card right now. We got to open the door to the sensory gym and let them self-regulate, right? We got to get them to this preferred area and let them self-regulate, get the weighted blanket, whatever it is that's going to help this kiddo out. But before we do that, let's just have that card on the ground and have them touch that kind of in passing. Hey, great job, and let's do it. But to answer that question, again, we really look to individualize care, get to know the child, get to know the antecedents of their behavior versus the antecedents of a meltdown, and distinguish that way.
Okay, we have a question from Tori. I'm curious to why are the ABA sessions 4 hours a day? And I think you kind of touched on that, but
Yeah, absolutely. So the duration of the session is going to depend on a few things. It's going to depend on your child's level of need and also where they are developmentally and what is appropriate for them as to what we're trying to achieve. And the best way I can answer that is within the context of my clinics here at Family Solutions. So we have two distinct sessions. We have the afternoon session, which runs for about 3 hours, and that's our school age kiddos. They'll go to school and then come here for 2.5 to 3 hours. And then we have the morning session, which is the longer one, the 5 hour one that's from 8 to 1. What we're looking to do, especially with those early ones, because I feel like, Tori, maybe you're asking, why on earth is it so long? What we're trying to do, these are individuals who are 2, maybe 3 years old with the hopes of transitioning into a kindergarten program. So we're going to do everything we can to do that. And within our clinics, we generally start a kiddo out in a one-on-one session room. They're the only ones in it, just them and their therapist and the BCBA when they're doing supervision. As they progress, as they gain more social skills, more functional communication skills, we're going to generalize them to our school readiness area. That's a bigger room with maybe 2 or 3 sessions going on, because guess what? That's going to be your kindergarten classroom. Now, we're still working on therapeutic goals. We're still one-on-one with a therapist. That does not change when we move to school readiness. But we are going to do circle time. We're going to do a group snack time. We're going to do a group art activity. We're going to do all the things that they're going to be asked to do in a kindergarten classroom on roughly the same timeline, but we're going to individualize it. We're going to have that support one-on-one. So that way, when they're confronted with it, they have those tools built in. So that's the reason for that longer one to address maybe some low support need individuals. Um, I've had clients in my clinic who are just working on a few social skills, looking to build those conversational repertoires. We might only do 1 to 2 sessions a week, maybe 2.5 sessions. And that's really good because before getting into the meat of a session, we build rapport. We're not just going to go in guns blazing and try to work on targets. We're gonna do something fun at first. We're gonna break the ice. We're gonna do something they like. Then we're gonna transition it into the therapy, right? So that's all built in. That's all baked into the therapy. Also baked into the therapy is going to be again breaks, reinforcement, getting that iPad, getting those social games, and all the things they need. So that's also part of it.
And Tori also had a follow-up question. She said, where can I find somewhere that is willing to work with my child's schedule?
Tori, can you, I guess, specify what schedule you're looking for, if that's possible?
Okay. All right. So we're going to move to the next one, and maybe Tori
Okay,
will put some
great.
clarification in the chat. How do you make sure behaviors transition over from the clinic to their everyday settings, such as home or school?
Outstanding question. Again, a lot of that will fall on parent training first and foremost. And one thing that I didn't touch on, but I want to make clear because of that great question, we as BCBAs are over the moon, ecstatic, dying and willing to coordinate with the school environment. If you want to invite me to an IEP meeting, I'm there with bells on. If a teacher wants to invite me into the classroom, I will be there. Same for all of my colleagues. We love going into those other settings and seeing what our kiddos are like in the home and the school setting. When appropriate, we do breakout parent trainings in the home. If there's a behavior that a parent is telling us is going on and we've never seen it in the clinic and we can't conceptualize it, we'll do an at-home parent training, again, when appropriate. But it is a matter of, again, just giving that access and making sure that we find the time to train y'all on the skills that we're doing. We're going to break it down for you in a way that we're not going to try not to use a lot of terminology. Our field is stupid with terminology. I'll be the first one to say it. We're going to try to strip some of that away, make it make sense to you, and give you some achievable goals. One thing I want to say to that, we try to be realistic as much as we can. We as BCBAs, as line techs, as BCABAs, are not going to expect you, the parent, to do everything we do at the clinic. At the end of the day, you're still mom, you're still dad, you're still grandma, and you still need to be that. That's first and foremost. We're going to work with you to see how much can you commit to, what can you do, what's going to work within your household, and that's how we're going to generalize it in the best way.
All right, so we have a question from Leslie. She wants to know, what is your opinion or view on the new neurodiversity movement and those that are against ABA, saying it induces or causes trauma?
Absolutely. So I believe what she's referring to a little bit. There is a big push for recognizing neurodiversity, and conceptualizing the neurodiversity spectrum as much larger than we previously thought it was, right? So individuals who are ADHD being considered neurodivergent, along with those who are on the autism spectrum. Um, I'm a huge proponent of that. I'm a huge proponent of, the world not putting, square pegs into round holes. The world is made up of a lot of different and unique neurological makeups, and that's what makes the world really go round and function. I myself have ADHD. I don't think I could do this job if I didn't have ADHD. I go 4,000 miles an hour and it works very well for me. I couldn't imagine life any other way. To answer the second part of the question, honestly, I hate that some of these individuals have a point, but they have a point. If you remember me talking about trauma informed care, I said that this was a movement that I saw within the past decade. Um, that's horrible. It's great that it's happened, but that's horrible. I began in this field in I want to say it was 2007, 2008 when I kind of dipped my toes in as a line tech. And at that point, there was still a lot of people that were putting kids in chairs and saying, "Hey, good job sitting." No, 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 no. That's traumatic. That is trauma inducing. And anybody who gets on a forum and says, "Hey, I'm a neurodivergent individual. I am 30 years old and ABA traumatized me. I hate it," but there's a good chance they have a point. Okay, because 30 years ago, 20 years ago, our field was not in the place that it is right now. There have been phenomenal, phenomenal work. I would encourage anybody kind of wanting to learn more about that vein to look into the work of Dr. Greg Hanley. He's been a huge proponent recently of the trauma-informed care movement and how to treat problem behavior in a trauma-informed way. But again, we as a field have moved away from that old setting, away from the we're going to force compliance. We don't force compliance, we teach it. We provide the opportunities for compliance and then we reinforce it. One of my favorite sayings that you'll hear all over, all up and down the halls of my clinic. Not right now. My friend is having a moment. And what does that mean? That's usually in response to, "Hey, it's group." Not right now. My friend's having a moment. What that means is that friend is having a tantrum, right? We are in the middle of something, whether it is a sensory meltdown, whether it is a tantrum for an antecedent that we've identified. But guess what we're not going to do? We're not going to pick that child up, drag them down the hallway, and bring them to group because it's group time. No way in hell. That's traumatic. We're going to let them have their moment when they've regulated, when they have the tools that they need to engage with a choice. We're going to give them the ability to engage with choices. We're never going to physically prompt something, and that's where a lot of the trauma comes from.
Great. And Courtney, she wants to know, how can she get certified in ABA?
Oh, very cool question. I love enthusiasm for the field. Okay. So, Courtney, I don't know where you are right now in life, so I'll just kind of go through the whole spectrum. Your intro into ABA, as it were, can start literally after you've graduated high school. So I have a lot of line techs who are currently college students. That's how I got started, right? I got my undergrad degree from LSU. Um, and I got started at what is now the Emerge Center, what was then Baton Rouge Speech and Hearing Foundation, as a sophomore at LSU. So I had just a high school diploma. And that is what you need to be a behavior technician, a registered behavior technician. Through that, you can take courses to become an RBT, which is sort of it's going to teach you some of the ABA terminology, and you will be sort of a higher level line tech. With a bachelor's degree, generally in psychology, counseling, something of that nature, with a concentration in ABA. So taking ABA coursework with a bachelor's, you can start accruing field work hours. You need 1,500 for your assistant. But essentially, for field work hours, you would work under somebody like me and sort of experience under our guidance. As a matter of fact, at 1 o'clock, I have an intern meeting with all of my interns to see where they're at, what they're learning, what they can do. But you'd work in an environment like that to get your field work hours, and then you'd be able to sit for your board exam, which I'm not going to lie to you as a bear. It's tough, guys. It is a big bad exam. But at that point, with a bachelor's and 1,500 hours, you can sit for your BCABA, which is an assistant behavior analyst, and the kind of highest level you can go to with a master's degree with coursework concentration in behavior analysis and 2,000 hours of supervised field work, you can sit for your BCBA exam, which is the basically gives you the ability to practice independently, supervise line tech, supervise assistant behavior analysts, et cetera, et cetera. And there are individuals in the field with a PhD and a BCBA-D. They have the same scope of practice as a BCBA. Those tend to be the individuals working in an academic setting and teaching ABA. So I don't know where you are currently in your journey, but hopefully that answered the question wherever you happen to be.
All right, so we do have 5 minutes left. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of like skip around the questions and go to someone who hasn't asked a question previously. So I do
Okay.
have a question from Brittany, and she says, my son is in ABA and was asked to leave because they said that 1 day a week was not enough, even though I offered the entire day to be available. I don't understand how no therapy is better than him getting 1 day a week of ABA. Any insight on that?
Yes, and that's a great question. And it's one that I've unfortunately had to broach with a few parents. So to approach that in the best way I can, again, remember that baked into an ABA session is a lot of things. We're pairing with reinforcement, as we call it. So we're getting on their level, we're doing fun things, we're breaking the ice, then we're getting into the behavior skills, we're getting into the functional communication, we're getting into what we call discrete trials, which is working on receptive language and identifying and things like that, other deficits. The problem that I've seen, and I've had a parent come to me, and initially we, for that morning session, we'll offer 5 days a week. If the parent can only work with 4, we try to make that happen. I've had parents say, well, I can only do 3, and that gets stripped down. The problem we start running into is the problem of what we call instructional control. At 1 day a week in our environment, we are basically spending almost that whole session trying to pair with that child. We have no momentum, right? Um, Momentum, and actually I just got back from a conference and hearing a great talk about assent in the field, again kind of on the trauma informed care topic, and it was, assent is a buzzword. You as a BCBA have to build assent, and so if you as a BCBA have to spend the first few weeks of treatment pairing, playing, getting on the floor, laughing, giggling, rolling toys, that's what you have to do, because that child has to choose to buy into you. That is assent, right? On that vein, it is very difficult to build that kind of rapport, and build any kind of behavioral momentum with that just 1 day a week, right? We pair, we build, we get that going. By the end of our session, the child's kind of happy, and then that day ends, and then a week passes, and we're back to square one, right? And so it's tough to build that momentum. And the biggest risk we have when we do not build that rapport and we don't build that behavior momentum is if a kid isn't bought in, if they don't build that assent, our therapy starts to become aversive. It becomes that place that I have to go to 1 time a week, and it's different. I've spent 6 days in a more preferred environment. Now I'm going down to square root one. It becomes aversive, and that makes it difficult for them to contact treatment successfully anywhere else or at any other point. So that's why no treatment, and I understand the dissonance there of no treatment can't be better than none, but treatment where we don't build momentum can be harmful. And that is where it becomes more advantageous to discontinue than to continue on with no behavioral momentum.
And Courtney asked for your contact information, and I put it in the chat,
Yes.
but Courtney, his contact information is also on the screen, and you
Yes, ma'am.
will also get emailed out a copy of this PowerPoint. I did want to go back to Tori that had that question earlier, and we asked for clarification.
Yes.
Um, she said that her son is in daycare, so the issue is not having afternoon sessions available for those kids. I don't mind. I got to go back up. I missed my spot. Let me see. Okay, she says she don't mind that there are 3 to 4 hours. She just wish that the facility understands my family's schedule. They only have mornings available.
Okay. Gotcha. And I can't speak to that obviously specific situation or facility. However, one thing I'll say is kind of a blanket statement, twofold, right? One, I've had a lot of parents of, say, a 12-year-old who is level 3, needs a lot of support, look at me and say, Scott, they need 30, 40 hours of therapy. Why can't they come in the mornings when they're going to be getting 25 hours a week? They need it. And you know they need it. I can see on your face that you know they need it, Scott. And here's my answer to that. And here's going to be one part of the answer. We have to, again, make skills generalizable. And so if our clinic is structured such that our morning sessions are for ages 2 to 4, if we bring a 12-year-old into that, one, the 12-year-old's not going to get a lot out of it. And I don't, even with a severe developmental disability, that 12-year-old has a biological desire to be with other 12-year-olds, to socialize with people that look and act like him. He's not going to want to socialize with a 2-year-old. And so if we go to work on social skills, if we look to reinforce with play, there's no real functional way to do that. On the flip side, for those individuals who are 2 and 4 years old, seeing a 12-year-old with severe problem behaviors can be traumatic, which is something that, again, we're trying to guard against. So for that reason, we do try to schedule such that we have people that are on this on the same age and peer group together in therapy, so we can do groups, so we can do social skills, so we can make sure it's an optimal environment. The other thing being, a lot of these therapy schedules, I know in my centers, we have to put them somewhere. We have to draw a line somewhere. And as you remember from the beginning, this is a one-to-one service, right? So it's not something that, okay, Susie is going to come at 8, and I know we don't have a therapist for it, but she can kind of, just sort of vibe in the sensory room until that therapist is available at 10. We cannot operate that way, because it has to be one-to-one. If it's not one-to-one, we cannot bill insurance, and we do not bill you for services. So we cannot function like a daycare in that we can see and kind of pay a little bit more for before care, this or that. It has to be one-on-one, which means there has to be a therapist available. And we can only have therapists during certain times of the day when they're, stated to work. And so a lot of times we run into that restriction as well. Do we try to optimize it as much as we can? Of course. We try to get the most common sense schedule out there. It does not work for everybody. I will not say for a second it does. But all we can do is, again, provide as much of a schedule that's going to allow for one-on-one optimized therapy as we can.
All right, I think this is a real interesting question, so I definitely wanted to get this one in here.
Yeah.
It say, do you suggest that a nonverbal child with an autism diagnosis be homeschooled or do ABA therapy, or do you suggest peer-to-peer interaction with students his age in school and ABA therapy?
That's an interesting question, and one that I would answer by saying not enough information, and we don't have enough time to get information, because that's something that I would seek to answer after I got to know that child for a few months. Because I think there's some situations where a child is not ready for that peer-to-peer interaction quite yet. We want to, again, and remember, I went over the structure of a lot of our clinics previously. We're going to start in that one-to-one room, very stripped down, very individualized. And little by little, we're going to increase their social exposure in the center to the point where they might be sharing a room with peers, right? We work up to that. That being said, do we want to stay one-to-one forever? Not a chance. Our goal is always to get that child to the point where they are contacting as much peer reinforcement as possible, right? One of the big things, remember, even going back to my functions of behavior, it's not always an iPad. It's not always to escape work. Sometimes, actually, quite frequently, the function of the behavior is attention. They want social attention. Why? They want the same things that we do. They want friendship. They want to play. They want to make that connection. We are doing ABA so they can interact with their peers on a functional level, so they could be one with their peers, so they could do everything that these other kids are doing. So to answer that, for the most part, in a generality, I would say let's start individual. Let's start kind of self-contained, and let's work up to getting that peer interaction. Let's make being generalized to a school the goal. When that will occur, that's on the specific learner, right? And so I would encourage you to find a BCBA or a practitioner that you're comfortable with and ask them those questions and ask them to kind of guide you through that.
All right, Scott, this is going to be our last question, and it's a follow-up from Tori. It says, so are you saying that my child will be around other kids while getting ABA therapy?
Yes, 100% yes. Again, depending on where they are in their treatment, it's gonna depend on how much they're with other kiddos. But 100%, even if this child is just starting out and they have very few social skills, we're going to start introducing it, right? And again, we're always teaching functional communication, and escape might be that. If they don't feel ready for socialization, we might introduce the idea of going to group, which is basically we're gonna sing songs, we're gonna do an art project, so think of group that way. And maybe them asking, hey, I'm not ready for this. I need to go back to my room, and them functionally mandating for that. We're going to introduce it little by little by little. But yes, absolutely, your child should be around other kiddos while they're getting ABA.
All right, well, that's all that we have. And Tori,
All
you can
right.
definitely reach out to our office at any time. I understand that this journey in navigating services can become frustrating. That's why we're here at Families Helping Families, because we like to say we've been there, we've done that, we're still going through it. And so, we made sure that we get all the information that we can so that we can pass it on to families and parents such as yourself to try to make this journey less frustrating. So, Scott, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for the information. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being so engaging. And this is it, guys. So we're at 12:07. A survey about this webinar will pop up. So we ask that you please complete the survey. Everyone completing the survey will get a copy of this presentation, as well as a certificate of attendance and a link to the webinar. So you can go back and watch it again anytime you would like. And so, in the words of one of my fellow coworkers, Miss Esther Wilson, have a great day and do it on purpose. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.